The pie sat untouched on the wooden platform at Broken Creek Station, still warm from Sarah Bennett's careful hands wrapped in cloth that had seen better days but was scrupulously clean. The March wind carried the scent of cinnamon and apples across the empty platform, where she stood, one small carpetbag at her feet, watching the dust settle behind the departing train. She knew what people saw when they looked at her. The scar tissue ran from her right cheekbone down her neck, pulling the corner of her mouth into what looked like a permanent half-smile. The skin was shiny, discolored tight, where it had healed badly after the fire. 2 years hadn't faded it. 20 years wouldn't either. In her coat pocket she carried $86, every penny she'd saved in 14 years of working the looms at Morrison Textile Mill in Pennsylvania. In her other pocket a letter on paper so worn from rereading that the creases threatened to tear through the words. The letter that had brought her 3,000 miles to marry a dead man. Sarah Bennett was 28 years old and had learned long ago that the world gave you nothing. You took what you could carry and you kept moving. When the textile mill caught fire 2 years ago, she'd gone back for Charlotte Myers, 15 years old, and trapped when her skirt caught in the machinery. They'd both survived, but Charlotte had walked out with clear skin and a future. Sarah had walked out marked. She'd lost her job 3 months later. Not for the scars the foreman had said, just cutbacks. But Sarah had seen the way customers flinched when she brought them their orders, had heard the mothers pull their children closer when she passed on the street. That's when she'd started reading the mail-order bride advertisements. Not because she believed in romance. Sarah Bennett was far too practical for that. But because staying in Pennsylvania meant dying by inches and she'd survived a fire. She wasn't about to surrender to a slow fade. Daniel Cross had written the most honest advertisement she'd ever seen. No flowery promises, no talk of love at first sight. Just seeking practical woman for partnership. Ranch life in Wyoming territory. Must be willing to work hard, speak honestly, and build something real. Romance is optional. Respect is required. She'd written back the same day. Their correspondence had lasted 2 years. 24 letters, each one more honest than the last. She'd told him about the fire, about the scars, about why she needed to leave. He'd told her about the ranch, about Wyoming, about wanting a partner more than a decoration. In his last letter he'd sent his mother's wedding ring and money for the train. He'd written, "Come in spring, we'll marry and see what we can build together." That letter had arrived the same week she'd received the other one. The one from a stranger named Ethan Cross, written in a harder hand with words that cut through politeness to brutal truth. Daniel Cross died 3 weeks ago in a blizzard. Before he died, he asked me to find you and marry you in his place. I am making this offer because I keep my promises. The decision is yours. Sarah had spent 2 days staring at both letters. The money Daniel had sent would get her to Wyoming. The money she'd saved would get her somewhere else if she chose. She could refuse. Could take her $86 and start over in Chicago or St. Louis or anywhere that wasn't the mill town where everyone knew her story. But she'd already bought the ticket, had already quit her room at the boarding house, had already said goodbye to the few people who still spoke to her without pity in their eyes. And she'd already decided that dying alone in a frontier town she'd never seen was preferable to dying alone in Pennsylvania, surrounded by people who couldn't look at her face. So she'd written back to Ethan Cross, "I'm coming. I have conditions." Now here she stood on a wooden platform in Wyoming territory, the wind pulling at her carefully pinned hair, holding a pie she'd baked that morning in the station keeper's kitchen as payment for the use of his stove. She had no idea what Ethan Cross looked like, had no idea if he'd even come to meet her, had only his word given to a dying man that he'd marry a woman he'd never met because he'd promised. The platform was empty, except for the station keeper, an old man who'd helped her with her trunk and then retreated to his office without meeting her eyes. Across the dirt road, she could see the main street of what passed for a town. 2 rows of wooden buildings, a church steeple, a general store with a painted sign. Maybe 300 souls total if you counted generous. And standing outside the general store, 3 women in dark dresses watching her. Sarah lifted her chin and stared back. She'd survived worse than small-town gossip. She'd survived fire. The women didn't look away. One of them, older in black silk that was too fine for a Tuesday afternoon, said something to the others. They all laughed. Not loud enough to carry, but Sarah didn't need to hear the words to know what they were saying. She picked up her carpet bag with one hand, the pie with the other, and stepped off the platform into Wyoming dust. The town looked like every frontier settlement she'd seen in photographs. Wooden sidewalks, hitching posts, dogs sleeping in the shade, men in work clothes moving between buildings with the efficient purpose of people who had cattle to tend and fences to mend. No one stopped, no one stared, except the three women outside the general store. Sarah walked toward them because running had never solved anything. As she got closer, she could see the oldest one more clearly. Probably 50, with steel-gray hair pulled back so tight it looked painful. The kind of face that had forgotten how to smile if it ever knew how. The kind of woman who measured worth by appearance and found most people wanting. "Good afternoon," Sarah said when she was close enough to be polite. The woman's eyes went straight to the scars, lingered there, traveled down to Sarah's worn dress and back up to her face. "You must be the mail-order bride." Not a question, an accusation. "I'm Sarah Bennett," Sarah said. She didn't offer her hand. This woman wouldn't take it. "Constance Pemberton." The woman didn't move. "I heard Daniel Cross had sent for a bride, though I must say we were all quite surprised when he died before you arrived. Tragic, really. All that way for nothing." Sarah had been practicing not flinching for 2 years. She didn't flinch now. "I was informed of Mr. Cross's death before I left Pennsylvania. I came anyway." Constance's eyebrows rose. "Did you now? And why would you do that if the man you came to marry was already dead?" "That's between me and whoever I choose to discuss it with." Sarah kept her voice level, pleasant even, but she saw the way Constance's mouth tightened. "Well?" Constance looked at the other two women. "I suppose we'll all find out soon enough. Small town, you understand. Word travels." "I'm sure it does." Sarah shifted the pie to her other hand. "Now, if you'll excuse me, I'm expected." "By whom?" Constance's voice sharpened. "Daniel Cross is dead, Miss Bennett. There's no one expecting you here." Sarah was saved from answering by the sound of boots on wood, heavy steps deliberate coming up behind her. She turned. The man was tall, not unusually so, but tall enough that she had to tilt her head back to meet his eyes. He wore work clothes, faded denim, and a shirt that had seen too many washings, a wide-brimmed hat that shadowed his face. His hands were work-roughened, scarred across the knuckles. His jaw was set in a way that suggested he didn't smile often, but it was his eyes that made Sarah's breath catch. Blue-gray like winter sky before a storm, looking at her with an intensity that made her feel seen in a way she hadn't felt in 2 years. He didn't look at the scars. He looked at her. "Miss Bennett," he said. His voice was rough, like he didn't use it much. "I'm Ethan Cross." Behind her, Sarah heard Constance's sharp intake of breath. She ignored it. "Mr. Cross?" Sarah studied him the way he was studying her, trying to see past the rough exterior to whatever Daniel Cross had trusted enough to ask this of. "You came." "I said I would." He gestured toward the carpetbag at her feet. "That all your luggage?" "I have a trunk on the platform." "I'll get it." He moved past her toward the station, then paused and looked back, not at her, at Constance. "Mrs. Pemberton, always a pleasure." The words were polite. The tone was ice. Constance's smile was equally cold. "Mr. Cross, I was just making Miss Bennett's acquaintance. Such an interesting situation you both find yourselves in. Daniel barely cold in the ground, and here you are taking his place. One might almost think it was planned." Sarah saw Ethan's jaw tighten, saw his hands curl into fists at his sides, but when he spoke his voice was perfectly controlled. "Daniel asked me to take care of Miss Bennett. I'm honoring his request. If you have a problem with that Mrs. Pemberton, you're welcome to take it up with me, not with her." He walked away before Constance could respond. Sarah stood alone with the three women and their judgment. She could feel their eyes on her scars, on her worn dress, on the pie in her hands that suddenly felt like evidence of desperation. "Well," Constance said softly, I suppose we'll see how this turns out. Though I must say, Miss Bennet, you should know that this town has standards. We look after our own, and we're very careful about who we welcome into our community." Sarah had spent 2 years being told she wasn't welcome. She'd learned how to swallow anger, how to keep her face smooth when everything inside her wanted to scream. She used those skills now. "Thank you for the warning, Mrs. Pemberton." She met the older woman's eyes. "I'm sure you mean well." She walked away before Constance could see her hands shaking. Ethan was already loading her trunk onto a wagon when she reached the platform. He moved with the easy efficiency of someone who'd been doing physical labor his whole life. When he saw her, he jumped down and took the pie from her hands. "You baked this morning, I thought—" Sarah trailed off. What had she thought? That bringing a pie would somehow make this less awkward, that it would prove she was worth keeping around. Ethan looked at the pie, then at her. "Thank you. I haven't had homemade pie since—" He stopped, shook his head. "Been a while." He helped her up onto the wagon seat. His hands were careful, impersonal. Then he climbed up beside her and took the reins. They were a mile out of town before either of them spoke again. "Daniel wrote about you," Ethan said finally. "In his letters. He was going to marry you in April." "I know." Sarah kept her eyes on the landscape rolling past. It was beautiful in a way that hurt. Vast and empty and so different from Pennsylvania that it might as well have been another world. Did he suffer when he died?" Ethan was quiet for so long she thought he wasn't going to answer. Then, "Yes, but not for long. And he wasn't afraid. He just wanted to make sure you'd be taken care of. He didn't know me." "He knew enough." Ethan glanced at her. "He said you were honest, that you didn't ask for pity or promises, that you wanted partnership, not rescue." Sarah felt something loosen in her chest. "That's what I told him." "Is it what you want from me?" The question hung between them. Sarah turned to look at him properly for the first time, studied the lines around his eyes, the gray threading through his dark hair, the set of his shoulders that said he carried weight he never talked about. "I don't know what I want from you, Mr. Cross. I came here planning to marry Daniel, to build a life based on mutual respect and shared work. I didn't come here for love or romance. I came here because staying in Pennsylvania meant dying by inches, and I'd rather take my chances on dying all at once out here." She saw his mouth quirk. Not quite a smile, but something close. "That's honest. You said you wanted honesty." "I did." He guided the wagon around a rut in the road. "Then I'll be honest too. I married once, lost my wife and son to disease 3 years ago, swore I'd never do it again. When Daniel asked me to marry you, I said yes because I owed him my life 3 times over and because breaking a promise to a dying man isn't something I could live with." He paused, then continued, "But I'm not promising you love Miss Bennet. I'm not even promising you'll be happy. All I can promise is respect, honesty, and a roof over your head for as long as you want to stay. If that's not enough, I'll turn this wagon around right now and get you back on the next train east. No judgment, no questions." Sarah's throat tightened. She'd expected a lot of things from this conversation. She hadn't expected kindness. "What if I want to stay?" she asked. "Then we get married today and we figure out the rest as we go." He looked at her. "But I need you to understand something. This town, these people, they're going to talk. They're going to say things that'll make Mrs. Pemberton's welcome look warm. They're going to question why I'd marry Daniel's intended, why you'd marry me. If you can't handle that—" "I survived a fire, Mr. Cross." Sarah kept her voice steady. "I think I can survive gossip." This time he did smile, small but real. "Call me Ethan. If we're getting married, you should probably use my first name." "Sarah. Sarah." He said it like he was testing how it felt. "We should probably talk before we do this. Make sure we understand what we're agreeing to." "Where?" "There's a restaurant in town. Not fancy, but the food's decent, and it's quiet this time of day." Sarah thought about Constance Pemberton and her sharp eyes, about walking back into that town and facing more judgment. Then she thought about the alternative, getting back on a train, going back to Pennsylvania, back to the mill and the pitying looks and the slow suffocation of a life that held nothing. "All right," she said. "Let's talk." The restaurant was exactly what Ethan had described. Small, clean, mostly empty. The owner, a middle-aged woman with kind eyes, seated them in the back corner without comment, though Sarah saw her gaze linger on the scars before she looked away. They ordered coffee and sat across from each other at a scarred wooden table. Through the window, Sarah could see the main street, could see people going about their business, could see Constance Pemberton standing outside the general store watching. "She's going to be a problem," Sarah said. Ethan followed her gaze. "Constance. She's always a problem. Appointed herself the town's moral guardian about 5 years ago. Hasn't found anything yet she doesn't disapprove of." "She disapproves of me. She disapproves of everyone." Ethan turned back to her. "But you're right. She'll make trouble if she can. Question is whether you can handle it." Sarah wrapped her hands around her coffee cup. The warmth felt good against her scarred palms. "Tell me something, Ethan. When you look at me, what do you see?" He didn't answer immediately. Didn't look away from her scars or pretend they weren't there. He looked at them. Really looked. Then he looked at her eyes. "I see someone who's been through fire and came out the other side," he said. "I see someone who chose to come 3,000 miles to marry a stranger rather than give up. I see scars, yes, but I also see strength." Sarah's eyes stung. She blinked hard. "Daniel wrote something similar, in one of his letters. Daniel was a good judge of character. What did he tell you about me?" "Really?" Ethan leaned back. "Nothing. I only learned about you after he died. Found your letters in his saddlebag. I read them. All of them. I hope that doesn't offend you, but I needed to know who I was writing to." "I would have done the same." Sarah took a breath. "So you know about the fire, about why I wanted to leave. I know you saved a girl's life, that you went back into a burning building when everyone else was running out, that you were marked for it and then lost your job because of how you looked." Ethan's voice was flat, but Sarah heard the anger underneath. "I know the world's not fair and that the wrong people pay the price for doing the right thing. Is that why you agreed to marry me, because you felt sorry for me?" "No." The word was immediate, hard. "I agreed because I gave Daniel my word, and because from your letters you seemed like someone who understood what partnership meant, someone practical enough to build something real without needing pretty lies." He paused, then added more quietly, "And maybe because I recognized something in those letters, someone who'd been hurt and was trying to survive it. I know what that's like." Sarah studied him across the table, saw the truth in his eyes. "Your wife. What was her name?" "Elizabeth. Our son was William. He was 3. "How did they die?" "Plague. Went through the territory in the winter of '79, killed 1/3 of the people in this county." Ethan's hands tightened around his cup. "I was out on the range with the cattle. By the time I got back they were already sick. Elizabeth died first. William lasted 2 more days." Sarah reached across the table before she could stop herself, put her scarred hand over his. "I'm sorry." He looked at their hands, didn't pull away. "That's why I swore off marriage. Couldn't see the point in opening myself up to that kind of pain again. Then Daniel died and made me promise to do exactly what I'd sworn I'd never do." "You could have said no." "I owe Daniel my life. He pulled me out of a flash flood when we were 16, talked me out of doing something stupid after Elizabeth died, gave me work when I had nothing." Ethan's eyes met hers. "You don't say no to a dying man when he's asking you to take care of someone, not if you're any kind of decent." The restaurant owner brought their food. Simple fare stew and bread, but it smelled better than anything Sarah had eaten in weeks. She realized she was hungry, realized she hadn't eaten since yesterday. They ate in silence for a few minutes. Then Sarah said, "I need to know what you expect from this marriage, specifically." Ethan set down his spoon. "Partnership, like you wrote to Daniel. You keep your own money. You work if you want to. You make your own choices. I won't try to control you or tell you what to do. In return, I expect honesty and respect, and I expect you to pull your weight. Ranch life is hard. I need someone who can handle that. What about—" Sarah paused, then forced herself to continue. "What about the physical side of marriage?" She saw him flush slightly. "I won't force anything. If that happens, it'll be because we both want it, not because we're legally married." Sarah felt something unclench inside her. "Thank you. I needed to know that." "Anything else you need to know? Can I ask you something personal?" "Go ahead. Why haven't you remarried before now? 3 years is a long time. And you're well. You're not." She gestured vaguely. "Not what? Not the kind of man who'd have trouble finding a wife if he wanted one." Ethan looked genuinely surprised. "You think that—" "I think you're successful, respected, and from what I can see, decent. Any number of women would be happy to marry you." "Then you haven't met the women in this town." He shook his head. "Mrs. Pemberton aside, most of the unmarried women here are either too young or looking for something I can't give them. Romance, poetry, pretty words. I don't have that in me anymore." "Neither do I." Sarah met his eyes. "But I can offer you partnership, honesty, hard work. I can cook, sew, teach if needed. I learned basic medicine working in the mill. I'm not afraid of difficult things." "I can see that." They finished eating. The owner brought coffee and what looked like fresh apple pie. Sarah wondered if everyone in Wyoming baked pie or if she'd just gotten lucky. When they were alone again, Ethan said, "I need to ask you something too, and I need you to be honest." "All right. Are you running from something? Besides the mill, I mean. Is there someone back in Pennsylvania who might come looking for you?" "Any trouble I should know about?" Sarah almost laughed. "No, no trouble except poverty and bad luck. My parents are dead. I have no siblings, no sweetheart waiting. I'm completely alone in the world, Mr. Cross. That's why I answered Daniel's advertisement, because being alone in Wyoming seemed better than being alone in Pennsylvania. It's Ethan." "Ethan." She said his name carefully, testing it. "I have a question too. Ask. Do you believe in second chances?" He was quiet for a long moment. Then, "I think everyone deserves a second chance. I think we're all just trying to survive our first chances that went wrong. So yes, I believe in second chances." "Good." Sarah took a breath. "Because I'm going to need you to believe in this one. I'm going to need you to believe that I'm here for the right reasons, that I'm not trying to take advantage of your promise to Daniel, that I want to build something real." "I believe you." "How can you? You don't even know me. I know you came 3,000 miles on the word of a dead man and a stranger's promise. I know you walked off that train carrying everything you own and didn't flinch when Constance Pemberton tried to make you feel small. I know you asked about whether I'd force you before you asked about where you'd sleep or what kind of house I have." Ethan leaned forward. "That tells me plenty." Sarah felt her eyes sting again. She'd cried more in the last 10 minutes than she had in 2 years. "I want to stay, if you'll have me." "Then we should probably get married before I lose my nerve. Today. You said you wanted it done today. I'm not going to argue with practical." He stood, leaving money on the table. "Reverend's probably at the church. We'll need witnesses. I can ask Buck Harrison, he works at the ranch with me. And maybe—" "Not Mrs. Pemberton." Ethan's mouth quirked. "No, definitely not Mrs. Pemberton. The general store owner and his wife will do. They owe me a favor." They walked out into the afternoon sun. Sarah saw people watching, saw the way they looked at her and Ethan together, saw Constance standing in the same spot, her face set in lines of disapproval. Ethan saw her too. He offered Sarah his arm. Might as well give them something to talk about. Sarah took it. His arm was solid under her hand, steady. They walked down the main street of a town Sarah had never seen before toward a church she'd never entered to marry a man she'd met an hour ago. It should have felt insane. It should have felt terrifying. Instead, it felt like the first real choice she'd made in 2 years. The church was small, white-painted wood with a simple cross above the door. Inside it smelled like polish and old hymn books. The Reverend was an older man with kind eyes and a gentle smile. He looked at Sarah's scars directly, then met her eyes with the calm acceptance of someone who'd seen all manner of suffering in his years of ministry. "Ethan," he said, "wasn't expecting to see you today. Reverend Martin, this is Sarah Bennett. We'd like to get married, today if possible." Reverend Martin's eyebrows rose. "Today? That's rather sudden. Sarah was supposed to marry Daniel Cross. He died before she arrived. Before he died, he asked me to marry her in his place." Ethan's voice was steady. "I'm honoring his request." The Reverend looked between them. Sarah could see him processing this, could see the questions forming. But what he said was, "And Miss Bennett, you agree to this?" "I do," Sarah said. "I came here to get married, to build a life in Wyoming. That hasn't changed just because circumstances have." "Well," Reverend Martin smiled, "I suppose if you're both certain, I see no reason to delay, though you'll need witnesses. Church law requires 2. "I'll find Buck," Ethan said, "and the Petersons from the general store." "I'll wait here," Sarah said. Ethan left. Sarah stood alone in the church, looking at the simple altar, the wooden pews, the afternoon light streaming through plain glass windows. This wasn't how she'd imagined her wedding. She'd imagined something small but planned. Not this hasty arrangement born of a dying man's request. But then nothing in her life had gone according to plan. Why should her wedding be different? Reverend Martin came to stand beside her. "Are you all right, Miss Bennett?" "I'm fine. It's just this is rather unusual, and I want to make sure you're not being coerced in any way." Sarah looked at him, at his kind face and genuine concern. "I'm not being coerced. I'm being given a choice. That's more than I've had in a long time." He nodded slowly. "Ethan's a good man. He's been through a great deal. Lost his wife and child. Hasn't been the same since. He told me." "Did he?" The Reverend looked surprised. "That's something then. He doesn't talk about them usually. Maybe that's why I'm here. Maybe Daniel knew we could help each other." "Maybe he did." Reverend Martin smiled. "Daniel was always perceptive about people. If he thought you and Ethan would suit, he was probably right." Ethan returned with Buck Harrison, a weathered man in his 50s with sharp eyes and a knowing smile, and the Petersons, who looked curious but not unkind. Mrs. Peterson's eyes went straight to Sarah's scars, but unlike Constance, there was sympathy there, not judgment. They gathered at the front of the church. Sarah stood beside Ethan, acutely aware of how little she knew this man, aware that in a few minutes she'd be legally bound to him, that her future would be tied to his. Reverend Martin opened his book. "Marriage is a serious covenant. It should not be entered into lightly." Sarah felt Ethan shift beside her, felt his hand brush hers, then withdraw. "Ethan Cross, do you take this woman to be your lawfully wedded wife, to have and to hold from this day forward, for better or worse, for richer or poorer, in sickness and in health, until death do you part?" Ethan's voice was steady. "I do." Sarah's heart hammered. "Sarah Bennett, do you take this man to be your lawfully wedded husband, to have and to hold from this day forward, for better or worse, for richer or poorer, in sickness and in health, until death do you part?" This was it, the moment where she committed to this impossible arrangement, where she chose Wyoming over Pennsylvania partnership, over loneliness, a stranger over an empty future. "I do," Sarah said. "Do you have rings?" Sarah reached into her pocket, pulled out the ring Daniel had sent. Simple gold, worn smooth with age. She handed it to Ethan. His hands shook slightly as he took it. This was Daniel's mother's ring. "He sent it to me, in his last letter. He said I should wear it when we married." Sarah's voice was soft. "I think he'd want it used." Ethan looked at the ring for a long moment. Sarah saw grief pass across his face, followed by something she couldn't quite name. Acceptance, maybe. Or peace. He slipped it onto her finger. It fit perfectly. "By the power vested in me by the territory of Wyoming, I now pronounce you husband and wife." Reverend Martin smiled. "You may kiss the bride if you wish." Ethan looked at Sarah. Sarah looked at him. They were married now, bound by law and a promise made to a dead man. He bent his head. She lifted her face. The kiss was brief, chaste, more ceremonial than romantic, but his lips were warm and his hand was gentle when it touched her arm. When they stepped back, Mrs. Peterson was crying. Buck was grinning. Reverend Martin was smiling. They signed the registry. Sarah Bennett became Sarah Cross. She watched Ethan's hand move across the page, his signature bold and clear. Then she signed her own name below his. It was done. They walked out of the church into late afternoon light. The street was busier now, people finishing their day's work. Sarah saw them stop and stare, saw the news spreading like wildfire. Ethan Cross had married the mail-order bride. Daniels intended. The woman with scars. Constance Pemberton stood across the street, her face a mask of barely controlled fury. Ethan saw her too. He took Sarah's hand. His palm was rough against hers, warm and solid. Ready. For what? For them to talk. For Constance to make trouble. For all of this to get complicated. Sarah thought about fire, about pain, about losing everything and choosing to keep going anyway. I'm ready. They walked to the wagon together. Ethan helped her up, then climbed beside her. As they pulled away from the church, Sarah looked back once, saw the town receding, saw Constance watching, saw the beginning of the life she'd chosen. The ride to Ethan's ranch took 40 minutes. They didn't talk much. Sarah watched the landscape roll past this strange new world she'd committed herself to. It was beautiful in a harsh way, empty and vast, and nothing like Pennsylvania. When they finally stopped, Sarah saw a small cabin, one room from the look of it with a porch and a chimney, simple but well-maintained, behind it a barn and a corral with horses. It's not much, Ethan said. I've been meaning to expand, but it's fine, Sarah said, and meant it. She'd lived in worse. He helped her down, then carried her trunk inside. The cabin was exactly what she'd expected. Sparse furniture, a stove, a bed in one corner, clean but clearly lacking a woman's touch. I'll sleep outside, Ethan said. On the porch, until we figure out. Thank you, Sarah said. She was exhausted. The weight of the day of the journey of everything that had changed pressed down on her. Ethan nodded, started to leave, then turned back. Sarah. Yes. Thank you for doing this, for trusting a stranger's word, for giving this a chance. He paused. I'll try to be worth it. Sarah felt her throat tighten. So will I. He left her alone then. Sarah stood in the cabin that was now her home, looking at the life she'd chosen. She thought about Daniel, who'd died asking a friend to keep a promise, about Ethan, who'd kept it, about herself, who'd been brave enough to say yes. She thought about fire and survival and second chances. Then she unpacked her trunk and started figuring out how to turn this cabin into something that felt like home. Outside, the sun set over Wyoming. Inside, Sarah Cross began the work of building a life from the ashes of everything she'd lost. She'd survived fire once. She'd survive this too. The next evening, Ethan arrived home with Buck Harrison and another man Sarah hadn't met. Sarah, this is William Fletcher, Ethan said. He owns Broken Creek Ranch. I work as his foreman, and I've been buying into a partnership stake over the past 3 years. Fletcher was in his 60s, weathered but sharp-eyed. He shook Sarah's hand firmly. Mrs. Cross, Ethan's told me about Daniel's request. I'm sorry for your loss, though I suppose that's a strange thing to say given the circumstances. Thank you, Mr. Fletcher. Daniel was my nephew, Fletcher said quietly. His father was my younger brother. We had our differences, but I loved that boy. I'm glad Ethan's honoring his last wish. Fletcher stayed for coffee talking about the ranch, about Ethan's partnership stake, 30% ownership that he'd been paying off monthly. When he left, Sarah understood better what was at stake for Ethan. This wasn't just a job. It was his future. And maybe, just maybe, she'd do more than survive. Maybe she'd learn to live again. Morning came cold and gray. the kind of Wyoming dawn that made Sarah grateful for the wood stove Ethan had loaded the night before. She woke disoriented, tangled in unfamiliar blankets, the scars on her neck tight from sleeping in an awkward position. For a moment she couldn't remember where she was. Then it came rushing back. The train. The wedding. Ethan sleeping somewhere outside while she took his bed. She dressed quickly in the dim light, her fingers clumsy with cold. Through the single window she could see the first streaks of pink touching the eastern sky. Somewhere in the distance, cattle lowed. Closer, she heard the creak of the porch boards. Ethan was awake. Sarah found him sitting on the porch steps, coffee cup in hand, watching the sun rise. He'd already changed into work clothes, his hat pulled low against the morning chill. He didn't turn when she opened the door, but she saw his shoulders tense slightly. "Morning," he said. "Morning." Sarah wrapped her shawl tighter. "Is there more coffee?" "Pot's on the stove. Help yourself." She went back inside, poured herself a cup from the battered tin pot, then returned to the porch. Ethan had moved over, making room for her on the step. She sat careful to leave space between them. They drank their coffee in silence as the sun climbed higher, painting the grasslands gold. Sarah had never seen so much sky. In Pennsylvania, the world had been hemmed in by buildings and smoke. Here, the horizon went on forever. "I need to head to the ranch," Ethan said finally. "I'm the foreman at Broken Creek. Work starts at dawn. I'm already late." "I didn't mean to keep you." "You didn't." He glanced at her. "I was just making sure you were settled." "I'm fine. You should go. There's food in the cold storage. Bacon, eggs, some vegetables. Help yourself to whatever you need." He stood dumping the dregs of his coffee into the dirt. "I'll be back around sunset. If you need anything before then, Buck Harrison's place is about half a mile south. You can see his lamp at night." "I'll be fine," Sarah said again. She'd been taking care of herself for 14 years. One day alone in a cabin wouldn't kill her. Ethan nodded, started toward the barn, then stopped. "Sarah." "Yes." "You did well yesterday. With Constance, I mean. Not many people stand up to her. I've dealt with worse than judgmental women." "I believe you." He smiled slightly, the expression transforming his face, making him look younger, less burdened. Still, it was impressive. He was gone before she could respond, riding toward the rising sun on a sturdy bay horse. Sarah watched until he disappeared over a low rise, then turned to survey her new domain. The cabin was small but solidly built. One room with a sleeping area, a cooking area, and not much else. Ethan's few possessions were neatly arranged. A shelf of books, mostly practical volumes on cattle and weather. A trunk that probably held his clothes. A washstand with a cracked mirror. No photographs, no mementos. Nothing that spoke of the family he'd lost. Sarah spent the morning exploring. She found the cold storage dug into the ground behind the cabin stocked with enough food to last weeks. Found the well, the water clean and cold. Found a small vegetable patch, dormant now but showing signs of careful tending. She also found, tucked in the back of Ethan's bookshelf, a small wooden box. Sarah knew she shouldn't open it. Knew it was private. But curiosity won out over propriety. Inside she found letters. 24 of them carefully preserved, all in the same feminine hand. The first was dated 4 years ago. Daniel's letters. The ones Sarah had written to him over 2 years of careful courtship through correspondence. Her hands shook as she read them. Seeing her own words, her own hopes and fears, laid out in ink that had traveled 3,000 miles. She'd been so honest in these letters, more honest than she'd ever been face to face with anyone. She'd told Daniel about the fire, about saving Charlotte, about the scars and the job loss and the slow suffocation of life in the mill. And he'd kept every word, had treasured them enough to preserve them, to carry them with him, had cared enough to ask his cousin to marry the woman who wrote them. Sarah sat on the cabin floor with the letters spread around her and cried. Not from grief exactly, from something more complicated. Gratitude, maybe. Or the realization that Daniel Cross had seen her, really seen her through nothing but words on paper. Had valued her enough to try to give her a future even after his death. She was still there, red-eyed and surrounded by letters, when she heard hoofbeats approaching. Sarah scrambled to gather the letters, shoving them back in the box. Through the window, she saw a horse and rider. Not Ethan. Someone older with a weathered face and knowing eyes. Buck Harrison. Sarah wiped her face and went to the door. Buck was dismounting, moving with the careful stiffness of someone whose joints had seen too many cold mornings. "Mrs. Cross," he said, touching his hat. "Hope I'm not intruding. Ethan asked me to check on you, make sure you had everything you needed." "I'm fine, Mr. Harrison, but thank you." "Buck, please." He smiled. "I've known Ethan since he came to Wyoming 15 years ago. Watched him marry Elizabeth, watched him bury her, watched him shut himself off from the world after. Yesterday was the first time I've seen him look alive in 3 years." Sarah felt heat rise in her cheeks. "I don't think I can take credit for that." "Can't you?" Buck's eyes were kind. "He married you. That's not nothing. Ethan Cross doesn't do anything he doesn't mean. He married me because he promised Daniel. He promised Daniel because he saw something worth promising for." Buck gestured toward the cabin. "May I come in? These old bones don't appreciate standing in the cold like they used to." Sarah stepped aside, let him enter. Buck looked around the sparse cabin, nodded approvingly. "You've already started making it home. I can tell." "How?" "Curtains are pulled back to let light in, stoves banked properly. You've swept the floor, small things, but they matter." He sat in one of the 2 chairs. "Ethan's not much for domestic comforts, too practical, but a home needs more than practicality." Sarah sat across from him. "You came to check on me, to make sure I wasn't going to cause Ethan trouble." "No," Buck shook his head. "I came to welcome you, and to tell you what Ethan won't, that he needs this. Needs you, even if he doesn't know it yet. He doesn't know me. He knows enough. And from what I saw yesterday, you know enough about him too." Buck leaned forward. "I'm going to tell you something not many people know. When Elizabeth died, Ethan shut down completely. Stopped eating, stopped caring. Daniel was the only one who could reach him. Brought him back from the edge." Sarah's breath caught. "He didn't tell me that." "Course not. It's not the kind of thing you tell a woman you just met. But I'm telling you because you need to understand. Daniel asking Ethan to marry you, that wasn't just about keeping a promise to you. It was about saving Ethan. Again. I'm not a cure for grief. No, but you're a reason to look forward instead of back. That's worth something." Buck stood. "I'll leave you be. But if you need anything at all, my place is half a mile south. You'll see the lamp." "Ethan told me." "Course he did." Buck smiled. "He's a good man, Sarah Cross. Give him a chance. I came 3,000 miles. I think that proves I'm willing to give him a chance." "Fair enough." Buck tipped his hat and left. Sarah stood in the doorway watching him ride away. Then she turned back to the cabin, to the box of letters still sitting on the floor, to the life she was trying to build from nothing but hope and determination. She had work to do. By the time Ethan returned that evening, Sarah had cleaned the cabin thoroughly, organized the kitchen area, and started a stew with the vegetables and bacon she'd found. The smell of cooking food filled the small space, making it feel more like a home and less like a bachelor's shelter. Ethan stopped in the doorway, surprise clear on his face. "You didn't have to do this. I needed something to do, and you need to eat." Sarah stirred the pot. "How was work?" "Long." He hung his hat on a peg, started to pull off his boots, then hesitated. Do you want me to eat outside?" "Why would I want that?" "I don't know. Just trying to figure out how this works." Sarah ladled stew into 2 bowls. "It works like this. We're married. We live together. We eat together. The rest we figure out as we go." Ethan nodded slowly, sat at the table, took the bowl she offered. They ate in silence, the only sound the scrape of spoons against tin. Finally, Ethan said, "I need to show you something. I found it weeks ago, right after Daniel died, but I wasn't ready to read it until now. It's a letter he wrote to me." Sarah's hand tightened on her spoon. "What? A letter, addressed to me. He must have written it before that last trip, before the blizzard." Ethan reached into his pocket, pulled out a folded piece of paper. He knew. Somehow he knew he might not make it back. "What does it say?" Ethan unfolded the letter. His hands shook slightly. "It says that asking me to marry you wasn't just about giving you a future, it was about giving me one too. That he'd watched me dying by inches since Elizabeth. That he thought maybe two people who'd survived their own kinds of fire might be able to help each other heal." Sarah's eyes stung. "He was a good man." "The best I knew." Ethan refolded the letter. "The thing is, I think he was right, about us helping each other. If you're willing." "I'm willing." Sarah met his eyes. "But Ethan, you need to understand something. I'm not here to replace Elizabeth. I'm not here to be a cure for your grief. I'm here because I need a life, and you offered me one. Everything else that has to come naturally or not at all. I know." He pushed his empty bowl away. "I'm not expecting you to be Elizabeth. She was her own person. You're your own person. I'm just saying maybe we can be partners, like Daniel said, like you wanted. Partnership, I can do that." "Good." Ethan stood. "I'll sleep on the porch again tonight, give you privacy." "Ethan, you can't sleep on the porch forever. It's March, still cold at night." "I've slept in worse." "I'm sure you have, but it's impractical." Sarah took a breath. "The bed's big enough for two people. If we're both mature about it, there's no reason we can't share." She saw him flush. "Sarah, I don't think—" "I'm not suggesting anything improper. I'm suggesting we both get proper sleep instead of you freezing on the porch and me feeling guilty about it. We can put a bolster down the middle if it makes you more comfortable." Ethan was quiet for a long moment. Then he laughed. Actually laughed, the sound rusty but genuine. "You're very practical, aren't you? I worked in a textile mill for 14 years. Practicality was the only thing that kept me alive." "All right. We share the bed. But Sarah, I need you to know I'm not expecting anything. I meant what I said. Nothing happens unless we both want it." "I know." Sarah started clearing the dishes. "Now go wash up. You smell like cattle." That became their routine. Ethan left before dawn for the ranch. Sarah spent her days making the cabin more livable, exploring the immediate area, learning the rhythms of this new life. Evenings they ate together, talked a little, then lay side by side in the big bed with a careful foot of space between them, neither touching both, acutely aware of the other. A week passed, then two. Sarah found herself settling into the life with surprising ease. She missed nothing about Pennsylvania. Not the mill, not the pitying looks, not the suffocating sameness of every day. Here every day was different. The sky changed constantly. The land shifted with the light. And Ethan, in his quiet way, was teaching her about this new world, showing her how to read weather signs, how to tend the vegetable garden, how to handle the 2 horses he kept for personal use. They were becoming friends, companions, partners just as they'd agreed. But Sarah was also becoming aware of something else, the way her heart lifted when she heard Ethan's horse approaching in the evening, the way she found herself looking forward to their quiet dinners, their brief conversations, the way it felt right to fall asleep, listening to his breathing in the darkness. She was developing feelings, real feelings beyond gratitude or partnership, and she had no idea what to do about it. 3 weeks after the wedding, Sarah walked into town. She needed supplies and wanted to establish herself to show Constance Pemberton and the rest of them that she wasn't going anywhere. The general store was run by the Petersons, who'd witnessed the wedding. Mrs. Peterson smiled when Sarah entered, though her eyes still went to the scars first. "Mrs. Cross, how nice to see you. How are you settling in?" "Very well, thank you." Sarah handed over her list. "I'll need these items, please." While Mrs. Peterson gathered the supplies, Sarah browsed the store. It was larger than it looked from outside, with everything from dry goods to hardware. She was examining fabric, thinking about making new curtains, when she heard the door open behind her. Constance Pemberton's voice cut through the quiet. "Well, if it isn't our newest resident." Sarah turned. Constance stood with 2 other women, both dressed in fine clothes that seemed out of place in a frontier town. All three were staring at Sarah with undisguised hostility. "Mrs. Pemberton," Sarah said evenly. "Good morning." "Is it—" Constance moved closer, her eyes sharp. "I've been meaning to call on you, Mrs. Cross, to welcome you properly to our community, though I must say your marriage was so sudden I hardly had time to prepare a proper welcome." "That's very kind, but unnecessary." "Oh, I insist. After all, we take care of our own here, and we're very particular about who becomes one of our own." Constance's smile was cold. "Tell me, how are you finding married life? It must be quite an adjustment going from a textile mill to a ranch, such different worlds." "I'm managing fine. I'm sure you are. You seem like a very resourceful woman." The way Constance said resourceful made it sound like an insult. "Though I must confess the whole situation is quite irregular. A woman arriving to marry one man, then immediately marrying his cousin instead. It does make one wonder." Sarah felt her temper rising but kept her voice level. "Wonder about what exactly?" "Oh, nothing specific. Just, well, people do talk. And in a small town, reputation is everything. One must be so careful about appearances. I've found that people who care more about appearances than character usually aren't worth impressing." Constance's face flushed. "How dare you?" "I dare because I've survived things you can't imagine, Mrs. Pemberton." Sarah stepped closer. "I've survived fire. I've survived poverty. I've survived people who looked at me and saw nothing but scars. Your disapproval doesn't frighten me. You should watch your tongue. This town has standards. And I have dignity, which means I don't have to stand here and listen to veiled insults." Sarah turned to Mrs. Peterson. "Are my supplies ready?" Mrs. Peterson, who'd been watching the exchange with wide eyes, nodded quickly. "Yes, Mrs. Cross, all packed." Sarah paid, took her packages, and walked out without another word to Constance. But her hands were shaking, and her scars felt tight the way they always did when she was angry. She was halfway home when she realized someone was following her. Sarah stopped, turned. A man on horseback was keeping pace about 50 yards back. Not Ethan, someone she didn't recognize. Older, well-dressed, with a hard face and calculating eyes. When he saw her looking, he tipped his hat and rode closer. "Mrs. Cross," he said. His voice was smooth, educated. "Forgive the intrusion. I'm Marcus Thornton. I don't believe we've met." "We haven't." Sarah's instincts screamed danger. Something about this man set her teeth on edge. "What can I do for you, Mr. Thornton?" "I'm the land agent for this county. I handle property disputes, boundary questions, that sort of thing." He smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. "I heard about your marriage to Ethan Cross. Quite sudden from what I understand." "That's our business." Of course. I merely wanted to introduce myself, and to offer my condolences about Daniel Cross. Such a tragedy. So young, so vital. And the circumstances of his death were quite unusual." Sarah's stomach tightened. "Unusual how?" "Oh, just that it happened during a routine cattle drive. Daniel was an experienced rancher, very careful. For him to be thrown from his horse in a blizzard, well, it seems almost too convenient." "Convenient for whom?" "That's the question, isn't it?" Thornton's smile widened. "But I'm sure it was just an accident. These things happen. Still, if you ever have questions about the property, about the ranch, about anything that seems irregular, please don't hesitate to call on me. I'm here to help." He rode away before Sarah could respond, leaving her standing in the middle of the road with packages in her arms and a cold knot of fear in her stomach. Something about that conversation felt wrong, felt dangerous. That evening when Ethan came home, Sarah told him about both encounters, about Constance and about Thornton. Ethan's face darkened at the mention of Thornton's name. "What exactly did he say?" Sarah repeated the conversation as accurately as she could, watched Ethan's jaw tighten with each word. "Thornton's been sniffing around the ranch for years," Ethan said finally, "trying to find some legal way to claim the land. He's convinced there's an error in the original land grant, something he can exploit." "And is there—" "No. Fletcher, the ranch owner, has had lawyers check. The title's clean, but that doesn't stop Thornton from trying." Ethan paced the small cabin. "What bothers me is him bringing up Daniel's death. Why would he do that unless— Unless what? Unless he knows something." Ethan stopped pacing. "Or unless he's trying to plant suspicion, make people question what happened." "What did happen? You said Daniel was thrown from his horse." "He was, during a blizzard. His horse spooked through him, he hit his head and broke his leg. By the time I found him, he'd lost too much blood." Ethan's voice was flat, reciting facts. "It was an accident. A tragic, senseless accident." But Sarah heard the doubt underneath, the questions Ethan hadn't asked aloud. "You think it might have been more than an accident?" she said softly. "I think Thornton showing up now, talking about convenient deaths and unusual circumstances, is suspicious. I think him approaching my wife when I'm not there is threatening." Ethan met her eyes. "And I think you need to be careful around him. Don't talk to him alone. Don't let him corner you." "I can handle myself." "I know you can, but promise me anyway, for my peace of mind." Sarah saw the fear in his eyes, the protectiveness. It touched something deep inside her. "I promise." "Good." Ethan pulled her into a brief, awkward hug. The first time he'd initiated physical contact beyond helping her up onto the wagon or steadying her arm. "I can't lose anyone else, Sarah. I just can't." Sarah's arms came up around him, returning the embrace. He was solid and warm, and she could feel his heart beating against her cheek. "You won't. I'm not that easy to get rid of." He laughed, the sound muffled against her hair. Then he stepped back, looking almost embarrassed. "Sorry. I didn't mean to—" "It's all right. We're married, Ethan. Hugging is allowed." "Right. Married." He ran a hand through his hair. "I keep forgetting that's not just on paper anymore." "Is it not?" He looked at her for a long moment. Something shifted in his expression. Something warm and uncertain and hopeful. "No, I don't think it is." That night they lay in bed with less space between them. Not touching, but close enough that Sarah could feel the warmth of his body. Close enough that when she woke in the night, she found her hand had reached across the distance to rest on his arm. She didn't pull away. The next morning Sarah made a decision. She was tired of hiding in the cabin, tired of letting Constance and people like her dictate how she felt about herself. If she was going to make a life here, she needed to establish herself, needed to contribute. So she walked back into town and straight to the schoolhouse. Miss Emily Pritchard was exactly what Sarah expected. Elderly, sharp-eyed, with the kind of posture that came from 40 years of teaching children to sit up straight. She looked at Sarah over wire-rimmed spectacles, taking in the scars without flinching. "Yes," she said, "my name is Sarah Cross. I'd like to offer my services as an assistant teacher." Miss Pritchard's eyebrows rose. "Indeed, and what qualifications do you have?" "I'm educated. Self-taught mostly, but I can read, write, and do mathematics. I taught the younger girls at the textile mill where I worked in Pennsylvania. Helped them learn their letters so they could read their contracts and understand what they were signing." "That's practical at least." Miss Pritchard studied her. "Why do you want to teach?" "Because I have skills and time, and I'd like to contribute to the community. And because I believe education matters. It's the only way people can better themselves." Miss Pritchard was quiet for so long Sarah thought she'd say no. Then she smiled. "When can you start?" "Whenever you need me." "Tomorrow morning then, 7 o'clock. We'll see how you handle the younger children." Miss Pritchard paused. "I should warn you, Mrs. Cross, some of the parents may object. Your appearance may make them uncomfortable." "My scars are from saving a young girl from burning to death. If parents have a problem with that, they can teach their own children." Miss Pritchard's smile widened. "I think we're going to get along just fine, Mrs. Cross." Sarah started teaching the next day. The children were wary at first, staring at her scars with the brutal honesty of youth. But Sarah met their stares head-on, told them the truth about how she'd been burned and moved on. Within a week, they'd stopped noticing. Within 2 weeks, she had the younger students reading better than they had in months. Miss Pritchard was delighted. The parents were grudgingly impressed. Even Constance Pemberton couldn't find much to complain about when Sarah's students began showing real progress. But it was one student in particular who changed everything. Lucy Porter was 10 years old, painfully thin, and hadn't been to school in 3 weeks. Sarah noticed her absence and asked Miss Pritchard about it. "Family troubles," Miss Pritchard said quietly. "Her father drinks. Her mother does washing for the wealthier families. Lucy has 3 younger siblings. When Mr. Porter's drinking gets bad, Lucy has to stay home to care for the little ones." "That's not right. She's one of the brightest students we have." "I know, but what can we do? The Porters are barely surviving as it is." Sarah couldn't get Lucy out of her mind. That evening she told Ethan about the situation. "James Porter," Ethan said grimly. "I know him. He's been fired from every ranch in the county for showing up drunk. His wife Ann is a good woman, but she's trapped. No money, no family, nowhere to go." "What if Lucy came here?" Sarah said suddenly. "During the day while Ann works. She could help me with light chores and I could teach her the lessons she's missing. One less mouth for Ann to feed during the day, and Lucy gets her education." Ethan looked at her, surprise clear on his face. "You'd do that?" "Of course. Why wouldn't I?" "Because it's not your problem. Because Lucy's not your child. Because you've only been here a month and you're already taking on the town's troubles." "She reminds me of myself at that age," Sarah said quietly. "Smart enough to want more than her circumstances allow, but trapped by poverty and family obligation. If someone had helped me, then maybe—" She trailed off. Ethan reached across the table, took her hand. "Then we'll help her. I'll talk to Ann tomorrow. Make the arrangements." "Just like that. Just like that." He smiled. "You care about this girl. That matters. And besides, I meant what I said in the church. We're partners. If this is important to you, it's important to me." Sarah felt her heart swell. "Thank you." "Don't thank me yet. James Porter's not going to like this. He'll see it as charity, as interference. Then we'll deal with James Porter if we have to." Ethan's smile turned grim. "Oh, we'll definitely have to." 2 days later, Lucy Porter arrived at the cabin. Small, wary, with bruises on her arms that made Sarah's blood boil. She stood in the doorway like she might bolt at any moment. Sarah didn't ask about the bruises, didn't push. Just offered Lucy breakfast, showed her the simple chores that needed doing, and started teaching her mathematics. By the end of the first week, Lucy had stopped flinching every time Sarah moved. By the end of the second week, she was smiling. By the end of the third week, she was reading 2 grades above her level and asking for more books. Sarah loved teaching her, loved watching the girl's confidence grow, loved seeing the intelligence in her eyes that had been dimmed by poverty and fear starting to shine again. Ethan seemed to love it too. He started coming home earlier, spending time showing Lucy how to whittle, teaching her to identify constellations, being gentle and patient in a way that made Sarah's heart ache. He would have been a good father, she thought. Maybe he still could be. Then James Porter came home drunk, and everything changed. It was late afternoon when Lucy arrived at the cabin, crying so hard she could barely speak. Her lip was split. There was a new bruise forming on her cheek. Sarah's vision went red. "He hit your mother," Lucy sobbed. "He hit her when she said I should keep coming here. And he said I can't come back. He said I have to stay home and watch the babies. He said learning is useless for a girl like me." Ethan, who'd just arrived home, knelt beside Lucy. His face was carefully neutral, but Sarah saw the fury in his eyes. "Where is he now, Lucy?" "Probably the saloon. That's where he always goes after." Ethan stood, walked to the door. Sarah followed him. "What are you going to do?" she asked quietly. "Have a conversation with James Porter about how real men treat their families." "Ethan, he's drunk and violent. You could get hurt." "I've handled drunk and violent before." Ethan's voice was cold, harder than Sarah had ever heard it. "No man hits a woman or child and walks away without consequences. Not in my town." "Your town." "My town," Ethan said grimly. "I've lived here 15 years, helped build half these buildings. I've earned the right to protect the people in it." He left before Sarah could argue further. She returned to Lucy, cleaned her split lip, made her hot cocoa, and waited. An hour later, Ethan returned. His knuckles were split and swollen, but he was smiling. "Lucy can keep coming," he said. "James and I had an understanding. He won't interfere again." Sarah wanted to ask what kind of understanding. Wanted to know if Ethan had hit James Porter, if he'd threatened him, if he'd done something that could come back to haunt them. But Lucy was looking at Ethan like he was a hero, like he was the father she'd never had, and Sarah felt something shift inside her chest, something warm and terrifying and completely beyond her control. She was falling in love with her husband, but their happiness was fragile. Unknown to them, Marcus Thornton had been watching, waiting, planning his next move. The confrontation Sarah had won at the general store, the respect she'd earned in town, the land she and Ethan were building their future on, all of it threatened what Thornton had been scheming for years. And men like Marcus Thornton didn't accept defeat quietly. The realization hit Sarah like a physical blow. She was in love with Ethan Cross. Not the comfortable affection of partnership, not the gratitude of rescue. Real love. The kind that made her heart race when she heard his horse approaching. The kind that made her notice the gray in his hair and the lines around his eyes and find them beautiful. The kind that terrified her because it meant she had something to lose again. She stood in the cabin doorway watching him tend to Lucy, his rough hands gentle as he checked the girl for other injuries, and knew she was completely, irrevocably in trouble. That night, after Lucy had gone home with promises that she could return the next day, Sarah and Ethan sat on the porch in the cooling evening air. Neither spoke for a long time. Finally, Sarah broke the silence. "What did you say to James Porter?" "The truth. That if he ever laid hands on Anne or those children again, he'd answer to me. That Lucy would continue her education whether he approved or not. That if he tried to stop it, he'd find himself unwelcome at every ranch and business in the county." Ethan flexed his swollen knuckles, and when he tried to take a swing at me, I made sure he understood I meant every word. "You hit him." "I defended myself. There's a difference." Ethan looked at her. "Does that bother you?" Sarah thought about it honestly, about violence and protection, about the difference between a man who used his fists to hurt the weak and a man who used them to defend them. "No, it doesn't bother me. James Porter is a bully who terrorizes his family. Someone needed to stand up to him. Buck says I'm getting soft in my old age, that the Ethan who first came to Wyoming would have done a lot more than bloody his nose." "What changed?" "Elizabeth. She civilized me, made me understand that strength isn't about how hard you can hit. It's about what you're willing to stand up for." His voice went quiet. "After she died, I forgot that for a while. Forgot a lot of things." Sarah reached out, took his injured hand in both of hers. "You're remembering now." "Am I?" "You stood up for Lucy, for Anne, for me when Constance tried to make me feel small. That's not forgetting. That's being exactly the man you're supposed to be." Ethan looked down at their joined hands. Sarah's scarred fingers against his work-roughened palm. Two people marked by their pasts, trying to build something from the wreckage. "Sarah," he said softly, "I need to tell you something." Her heart hammered. "What?" "This marriage. It started because I promised Daniel, because I owed him, and because I keep my word. But somewhere along the way, it became more than that." He turned to face her fully. "You became more than that. I look forward to coming home now, to seeing what you've done with the cabin, to hearing about your day, to just being near you. And I don't know what to do with that." Sarah's breath caught. "Why don't you know what to do with it?" "Because I swore I'd never feel this way again, never let anyone close enough to hurt me the way losing Elizabeth hurt. But you're already close, already under my skin, and it scares the hell out of me." "You think I'm not scared?" Sarah's voice shook. "I came here expecting partnership, practical arrangement. I wasn't supposed to fall in love with you." The words hung between them. Sarah watched them land, watched Ethan's eyes widen. "You love me." His voice was barely a whisper. I'm trying very hard not to. It's not working. Sarah pulled her hands back, stood up. I know that's not what we agreed to. I know you're not ready for that. So we can just pretend I never said anything and go back to... Ethan stood, caught her hand, pulled her back. I don't want to pretend, and I don't want to go back. He kissed her. Not the brief ceremonial kiss from their wedding. This was real, desperate. His hands cupped her face, careful of her scars, and his mouth was warm and demanding, and everything Sarah hadn't known she needed. When they broke apart, both breathing hard, Ethan rested his forehead against hers. I can't promise I won't mess this up, he said. I'm broken in ways I don't know how to fix, but I want to try, with you, if you're willing. I'm willing. Sarah's hands fisted in his shirt. But Ethan, I need you to understand something. I'm broken too. The fire didn't just scar my skin. It scarred everything. The way I see myself. The way I trust people. I'm going to have bad days. Days where I can't believe you actually want me. Days where I'll push you away because it's easier than risking more pain. Then we'll be broken together. Ethan kissed her again, softer this time. And maybe that's enough. They went inside together. To the bed they'd been sharing with careful distance. But tonight, there was no distance. No bolster down the middle. Just two people choosing each other's scars and all. Later, lying tangled together in the darkness, Sarah felt Ethan's hand trace the line of scar tissue down her neck. Does it hurt? He asked. Not anymore. Sometimes it feels tight, especially in cold weather. But the pain stopped a long time ago. I'm sorry you went through that. I'm not. Sarah turned to face him. If I hadn't gone through that, I wouldn't have answered Daniel's advertisement, wouldn't have come to Wyoming, wouldn't have found you. Some pain is worth what comes after. Ethan kissed her forehead. I love you, Sarah Cross. I probably have for weeks. I was just too stubborn to admit it. I love you too. Sarah settled against his chest, listening to his heartbeat. Now go to sleep. Morning comes early. She felt him smile against her hair. Yes, ma'am. The next few weeks passed in a blur of happiness Sarah hadn't thought possible. She taught Lucy every day, watching the girl blossom under attention and education. She worked with Miss Pritchard at the school, earning respect from parents who'd initially been skeptical, and she built a life with Ethan that was everything she'd hoped for and more. They were partners, friends, lovers. They worked together, making decisions about the cabin, about their future. Ethan started talking about expanding, adding rooms, maybe even starting a family someday. Sarah let herself hope, let herself believe this could last. Then Marcus Thornton made his move. It started small. Rumors began circulating that the land grant for Broken Creek Ranch was invalid, that William Fletcher, the owner, had no legal claim to the property, that it all belonged to the territorial government and would be available for purchase. Ethan dismissed it at first. Thornton's been trying this for years. He has no case. But the rumors persisted, got more detailed, more specific. People started talking about surveys that had been done wrong, boundaries that had been mismarked, legal technicalities that could void the original claim. Then Fletcher got a letter from the Territorial Land Office requesting he produce his original documents for review. It's a fishing expedition, Fletcher told Ethan. They were standing in Fletcher's office at the ranch, the letter spread on the desk between them. Thornton's got someone in the land office helping him. They're looking for any excuse to declare the grant invalid. Can they do that? Ethan felt cold dread settling in his stomach. If they find an error, yes, even a small one, a misplaced survey stake, a misdated document, anything. Fletcher looked old suddenly, tired. I've had lawyers review everything. They say we're solid, but lawyers have been wrong before. What can we do? Fight. Produce every document, every survey, every piece of evidence that this land is legally mine, and pray it's enough. Fletcher met Ethan's eyes. But Ethan, if Thornton wins, if he manages to void the grant, everything we've built is gone. The ranch, your partnership, all of it. Ethan rode home that evening with his mind racing. He'd sunk every penny he had into buying partnership in Broken Creek, had built his future around it. If Thornton succeeded, he'd lose everything. Again. Sarah knew something was wrong the moment he walked in. She set down the shirt she was mending, stood up cross to him. What happened? He told her everything. About Thornton's challenge, about the territorial land office, about the possibility of losing the ranch. Sarah listened without interrupting. When he finished, she was quiet for a long moment. Then she said, "Show me the documents." "What?" "The land grant, the surveys. Whatever Fletcher has, I want to see them." "Sarah, you're not a lawyer." "No, but I read contracts for 2 years at the mill. I know how to find loopholes, how to spot inconsistencies. Let me look." What could it hurt? Ethan didn't have the energy to argue. The next day he brought home copies of everything Fletcher had. The original land grant from 1867, survey maps, boundary descriptions, legal correspondence. Sarah spread it all out on their table and started reading. She read for 3 days straight, barely eating, sleeping in fits and starts. Ethan watched her work with a mixture of admiration and concern. She was brilliant, methodical, finding connections and patterns he would never have seen. On the 4th day she looked up with triumph in her eyes. "He's wrong," she said. "Thornton's wrong. The land grant isn't invalid. It's absolutely clear. The boundaries are here." She pointed to a survey map. "From the northern marker to the creek's eastern bank following the waterline south. That's unambiguous." Then why is Thornton challenging it? Because he's not actually questioning the land grant. He's questioning the water rights. Sarah pulled out another document. "Look, this is the territorial water allocation from 1869. It assigns water usage from Silver Creek to several properties. But the language is vague. It says, properties adjacent to Silver Creek. Thornton's arguing that Broken Creek Ranch isn't adjacent, that there's a gap. Is there? No. But the survey map from 1869 is slightly different from the survey map from 1867. Not enough to matter legally, but enough for Thornton to claim confusion. He's trying to create doubt where none should exist." Ethan stared at her. "How do you know all this?" "I told you. I read contracts. Hundreds of them. Labor agreements, property leases, everything the mill needed to function. You learn to spot the tricks people use to take advantage." Sarah's eyes were fierce. "And Thornton's using every trick in the book. Can we prove it?" "Yes. But we need the original surveyor's notes from 1867. They'll show definitively where the boundaries are. Fletcher probably has them in his files." They went to Fletcher the next day. Sarah explained what she'd found, what she needed. Fletcher listened, his respect for Sarah growing with each word. "You're right," he said when she finished. "I have the surveyor's notes. Haven't looked at them in years, but they're in the safe." He retrieved them. Sarah spent another 2 days comparing notes to maps, building an airtight case that Broken Creek's boundaries, including water rights, were exactly where they'd always been. When the Territorial Land Office held a hearing, Sarah attended. The only woman in a room full of men, most of them looking at her scars and dismissing her before she opened her mouth. Thornton presented his case first. Smooth, confident, pointing out the discrepancies in the surveys, the vague language in the water allocation, the potential for confusion. Then it was Sarah's turn. She stood, laid out her documents with calm precision, and methodically destroyed every argument Thornton had made. She showed how the surveys were consistent, how the water allocation language referenced the original land grant, how the surveyor's notes proved definitively where the boundaries lay. She was brilliant, merciless. The territorial agent presiding over the hearing tried to interrupt her several times, but Sarah simply talked over him, citing legal precedents, territorial statutes, even federal land law. By the time she finished, Thornton's face was red with fury. The territorial agent looked confused, and Fletcher was grinning. The agent reviewed Sarah's documents, compared them to Thornton's claims, and made his decision. The land grant for Broken Creek Ranch is valid in all respects. The water rights are clear and unambiguous. This challenge is dismissed. Thornton stood abruptly. "This isn't over." "Yes, Mr. Thornton, it is." The agent's voice was cold. And if you bring another frivolous challenge to this office, I'll recommend you be barred from practicing as a land agent in this territory. Good day." Outside, Fletcher grabbed Sarah in a bear hug. "You just saved this ranch. You know that, right? You saved everything." Sarah hugged him back, then turned to Ethan. His eyes were shining. "You're remarkable," he said. "Absolutely remarkable. I just read some documents. You did a lot more than that." Ethan pulled her close, not caring who saw. "You saved our future." But as they rode home, Sarah couldn't shake a feeling of unease. Thornton had looked too angry, too determined. Men like that didn't give up just because they lost once. She was right to worry. 2 weeks later, Lucy didn't come to the cabin for her lessons. Sarah waited an hour, then walked to the Porter house, a ramshackle structure on the edge of town. Ann Porter answered the door. Her face was bruised, her lips split. Behind her, Sarah could hear children crying. "Mrs. Cross," Ann said quietly, "you shouldn't be here. Where's Lucy?" "James took her this morning. Said he was taking her to his brother's place in Colorado. Said she needed to learn a woman's place, not waste time with books." Ann's voice broke. "I tried to stop him. She gestured to her face. Sarah felt ice in her veins. "When did they leave?" "Before dawn. They have maybe 6 hours on you." "On me. You're going after her, aren't you?" Ann looked at Sarah with desperate hope. "Please, she's my daughter. She's the only one smart enough to get out of this life. Don't let him destroy that." Sarah didn't go home. She went straight to the ranch, found Ethan working in the corral. "James Porter took Lucy," she said without preamble. "This morning. He's taking her to Colorado to his brother." Ethan's face went hard. "Get Buck. Tell him to saddle 3 horses and pack for 2 days. I'll get Fletcher's permission to leave. 3 horses. You, me, and Buck. We're going to need someone who knows the Colorado trails." Ethan was already moving toward the main house. "And Sarah, pack your rifle. James Porter isn't going to give Lucy up without a fight." They left within the hour. Buck led the way, following the trail signs that James and Lucy had left. Ethan rode tense and silent, his hand never far from the rifle on his saddle. Sarah brought up the rear, her own rifle loaded and ready, her heart pounding. They rode hard, stopping only to rest the horses. Buck was a relentless tracker, finding signs where Sarah saw nothing. Broken branches, disturbed dirt, horse droppings that told him how far ahead their quarry was. 6 hours became 4, he said that first evening. They're slowing down. Probably the girl's slowing him. "Good," Ethan said grimly. "Means we'll catch them tomorrow." They made cold camp that night, not wanting to advertise their position with a fire. Sarah lay in her bedroll, staring at the stars, thinking about Lucy. About a 10-year-old girl being dragged away from the only chance at a better life she'd ever have. Ethan lay down beside her, close enough that she could feel his warmth. "You should try to sleep. I keep thinking about her, how scared she must be. We'll get her back, I promise." He took her hand in the darkness. "I won't let Porter destroy that girl's future." "What if he fights? Then we fight back." Ethan's voice was flat, hard. "I've killed men before, Sarah, during the war. I hoped I'd never have to again. But if it comes to choosing between Lucy's life and James Porter's, there's no choice." Sarah squeezed his hand. "I love you, and I'm glad you're the kind of man who'd say that." They caught up to James and Lucy at noon the next day in a clearing beside a stream. James had built a fire, was cooking something over it. Lucy sat nearby, her hands tied her face streaked with tears. Ethan, Sarah, and Buck emerged from the trees on horseback, rifles ready. James jumped up, reaching for his own gun. Ethan's rifle was faster, aimed directly at James's chest. "Don't," Ethan said. His voice was dead calm. "Don't even think about it." James froze. His eyes went from Ethan to Buck to Sarah, calculating odds. "You got no right," he said finally. "She's my daughter. I can take her where I want. You have no right to destroy her future." Ethan dismounted, keeping his rifle trained on James. "Sarah, get Lucy. Sarah slid off her horse, went to Lucy, cut the ropes binding her hands. The girl threw her arms around Sarah's waist, sobbing. "It's all right," Sarah whispered. "We've got you. You're safe now." James's face twisted with rage. "You think you can just take her? You think you're better than me, you with your scars and your high-minded ideas about education." "I think I'm better than a man who beats his wife and terrorizes his children," Sarah said evenly. "I think anyone is better than that." James lunged for his gun. 3 rifles fired simultaneously. James Porter fell, blood blooming across his chest. He looked surprised more than anything. Then his eyes went vacant and he stopped moving. Sarah pulled Lucy's face against her shoulder, blocking the girl's view. Ethan lowered his rifle, his face expressionless. Buck was already dismounting, checking the body. "He's dead," Buck said quietly. Ethan nodded. "Self-defense. We all saw him go for his gun." "We did," Buck agreed. "Witnessed it myself." They buried James Porter in an unmarked grave beside the stream, said no words over it. Then they took Lucy and rode home. That night they made camp under the stars. Lucy fell asleep quickly, exhausted from fear and relief, but Sarah sat by the cold fire pit staring at her hands. Hands that had pulled a trigger, that had taken a life. Ethan found her there, her whole body trembling. "It doesn't go away," he said quietly, sitting beside her. "The knowledge that you took a life. I killed 3 men in the war. I still see their faces sometimes." "Does it get easier?" Sarah's voice was barely a whisper. "No, but you learn to live with it. You remind yourself why you did it, that some evils have to be stopped." He took her shaking hands in his. "You saved Lucy today. That matters more than anything else." "I'd do it again," Sarah said. "For her. But I wish I didn't have to." "That's what makes you a good person," Ethan said. "The fact that it bothers you." Sarah leaned against him, and they sat in silence until the shaking stopped. The territorial marshal held an inquest 3 days later. Ethan, Sarah, and Buck each testified under oath. The coroner's jury heard about James's history of violence, about Lucy being taken against her will, about the moment he'd reached for his gun. Ann Porter testified too, her bruised face telling its own story. The verdict came quickly: justifiable homicide in defense of another. The case was closed within a week. Ann Porter cried when they brought Lucy home, cried from relief and grief and gratitude all mixed together. She tried to thank Sarah and Ethan, but Sarah stopped her. "Lucy's education continues. She comes to us every day like before, and Ann, if you ever need help, you come to us. Understand?" Ann nodded, still crying. As they rode home that evening, Sarah and Ethan were quiet. The weight of what had happened, of taking a life even in defense of another, sat heavy on both of them. "Are you all right?" Sarah asked finally. "I killed a man today." "We killed a man. I fired too." "I know." Ethan looked at her. "Does that bother you, that we took a life?" Sarah thought about it honestly. "I'm bothered that we had to. I'm not bothered that we did. James Porter was going to destroy Lucy's future, maybe hurt her in worse ways. We stopped him. Sometimes stopping evil means getting your hands dirty." "You're a hard woman, Sarah Cross." "I'm a practical woman who survived a fire and a textile mill and traveling 3,000 miles to marry a stranger. Hard is what keeps you alive." She reached across, took his hand. "But I'm also a woman who loves you, who believes in second chances and building something good from broken pieces. So yes, I'm hard when I need to be, but I'm soft where it matters." Ethan raised her hand to his lips, kissed her scarred knuckles. "I love you too, and I'm grateful every day that Daniel asked me to keep his promise." By late summer, nearly 4 months after James Porter's death, something happened that changed everything. Sarah realized she'd missed her monthly courses. Once, then twice. She'd been too busy to notice at first, teaching Lucy, working at the school, helping Ethan with ranch decisions. She was never late, never irregular. She was pregnant. She told Ethan on a warm evening in late summer, sitting on their porch watching the sunset. They'd expanded the cabin, adding 2 rooms, One for Lucy, who now stayed with them most nights, Anne being too ill to care for all the children alone. One that they'd planned to use for storage. "We're going to need that second room for something else," Sarah said. Ethan looked confused. "What?" "A nursery." She watched his face as understanding dawned. "I'm pregnant, Ethan. We're going to have a baby." She watched emotions chase across his face. Joy, fear, grief for the child he'd lost, hope for the one coming. "Are you sure?" His voice shook. "As sure as I can be. 2 months now, I think." Ethan stood, pulled her up, wrapped her in his arms so tight she could barely breathe. "A baby! We're having a baby!" "Are you happy?" "I'm terrified. And yes, I'm happy. More happy than I thought I could be." He pulled back to look at her face. "Are you?" "I'm terrified too. But yes, I'm happy." Sarah smiled. "We're going to be parents, Ethan. We're going to build a family." "We already have a family." Ethan glanced toward the cabin where Lucy was doing her homework. "Now we're just making it bigger." The pregnancy progressed well. Sarah continued teaching, though Miss Pritchard insisted she take more breaks. Lucy was ecstatic about becoming a big sister, as she'd started calling herself. Even Anne, slowly recovering from years of abuse, found joy in helping Sarah prepare. In November, William Fletcher made Ethan an offer. "I'm getting old," Fletcher said. "My health isn't what it was. I have no children to leave this ranch to. I'm changing our partnership agreement. You own 30% outright now. No more payments. When I die, the rest transfers to you." Ethan tried to argue, but Fletcher held up a hand. "Daniel was the son of my younger brother. Did you know that? That made him your cousin through my side of the family." Ethan's stomach dropped. "No. We had a falling out years ago. Stupid pride on both sides. When he died, I lost my chance to make it right." Fletcher's eyes were sad. "But before he died, he wrote me a letter. Told me about Sarah. About asking you to marry her. About believing you two could build something real together. He asked me to watch out for you both." Fletcher handed Ethan a different envelope sealed with wax. "This is a second letter Daniel wrote. Separate from the one about you and Sarah. He sealed this one with instructions. For Ethan and Uncle William. Only if I don't return. I found it in his personal effects after he died, but couldn't bring myself to open it until now." Ethan's hands shook as he broke the seal. That night, Sarah and Ethan read this second letter together, the one Daniel had written knowing he might not survive. It said everything Buck had told Sarah months ago, that Daniel had engineered their marriage not just to protect Sarah, but to save Ethan, that he'd watched Ethan dying by inches since Elizabeth, that he'd thought two wounded people might heal each other. But there was more. "I know about Thornton," Daniel had written. "I know what he's planning. I found evidence that he's been forging documents planning to use them to claim the ranch. I was going to expose him, but if you're reading this, I didn't get the chance. Watch him, Ethan. Don't let him destroy what we've built, and don't let him hurt Sarah. Protect her the way I wish I could have." Ethan's hands shook as he read. He knew. Daniel knew Thornton was dangerous, and he was trying to stop him when he died. Sarah felt cold. "Ethan, what if Daniel's death wasn't an accident?" "What do you mean?" "Think about it. A blizzard. Daniel thrown from his horse, conveniently dead before he could expose Thornton's fraud." Sarah's mind raced. "What if Thornton killed him?" Ethan's face went white, then red with fury. "If Thornton killed Daniel, we'll prove it first. Then we'll make sure he pays." Sarah's voice was steel. "But we need evidence. We need to be smart about this." They started investigating carefully, quietly. Sarah, with her talent for reading documents, began searching territorial records for anything that might connect Thornton to Daniel's death. Ethan talked to the ranch hands who'd been on that cattle drive asking questions he should have asked 3 years ago. It was Buck who found the first real evidence. "I talked to Tom Riley," Buck said one evening. "He was riding drag that day, bringing up the rear of the herd. He said he saw another rider on the ridge above where Daniel went down. Said at the time he thought it was someone from a neighboring ranch, but it always bothered him. Who rides out in a blizzard unless they have to?" "Did he recognize the rider?" "No. Too far away, too much snow." but he said the horse was a gray, distinctive marking on its flank, star-shaped. Sarah and Ethan exchanged looks. They both knew who owned a gray horse with a star-shaped marking, Marcus Thornton. But knowing and proving were different things. They needed more. They needed something solid that would stand up in territorial court. They found it in Thornton's office, but getting in required careful planning. Sarah visited during business hours, asking about filing boundary papers. While Thornton searched for forms in his filing cabinet, she studied the office layout, where documents were kept, where the safe sat, the type of lock on the door. "I'll need to return tomorrow with the deed," she said. "Office hours are 9 to 4, Thornton replied dismissively. That night, Ethan examined the office door from outside. "Simple lock," he said quietly. "The kind that opens with a thin blade, if you know the trick." "Do you know the trick?" "I had a rougher past before Elizabeth civilized me." He worked the lock carefully with a piece of flat metal. Within 2 minutes the door swung open. They slipped inside with a single candle and began searching. What they found was worse than they'd imagined. Forged documents claiming the Broken Creek land grant was invalid. Correspondence with someone in the Territorial Land Office planning how to challenge the grant. And a journal written in Thornton's own hand detailing everything, including the murder of Daniel Cross. "Followed him out during the blizzard," Thornton had written. "Spooked his horse with a rifle shot. He fell, broke his leg. I waited to make sure he wouldn't survive, then left. By the time anyone found him, the snow had covered my tracks. Perfect accident." Sarah felt bile rise in her throat. Ethan's hands shook as he read. "He murdered Daniel in cold blood. For land. For money." Ethan's voice was deadly quiet. "And he almost got away with it." "He won't now." Sarah carefully copied the relevant pages. "We take this to the territorial marshal tomorrow. Let the law handle this." They did. The marshal arrested Thornton the next day. The trial was swift, the evidence overwhelming. Thornton was convicted of murder and sentenced to hang. The night before the execution, Ethan stood at Daniel's grave, Sarah beside him. "We got him," Ethan said quietly. "We got justice for you. I'm sorry it took so long." Sarah put her arm around her husband's waist. "Daniel would be proud of us, of what we've built, of how we've honored his sacrifice. I think he'd be proud of you especially. You saved the ranch, saved Lucy, helped me find my way back to living." Ethan pulled her close. "You're everything he hoped you'd be and more. We did it together." Sarah rested her head on Ethan's shoulder. "That's what partnership means." The baby came in late spring, a daughter with Ethan's blue eyes and Sarah's dark hair. They named her Grace Eleanor Cross after the grace that had brought them together and Eleanor Daniel's mother's name. Lucy, now 11 and reading at a high school level, was the proudest big sister anyone had ever seen. She helped with the baby, continued her education, and announced she wanted to be a teacher someday. Sarah, holding her daughter while watching Lucy help Ethan with the evening chores, felt a peace she'd never known before. She'd come to Wyoming expecting to survive. Instead, she'd found a life worth living. A husband who loved her not despite her scars, but because of the strength that had earned them. A daughter. A family built from the ashes of loss and the foundation of a promise kept. 10 years later, on this anniversary of their wedding, Sarah and Ethan stood where he'd first brought her home as his bride. The cabin had grown into a proper house. Lucy was in college studying to be a teacher funded by the education fund Sarah and Ethan had built for her. Grace was 10, bright and curious and completely unafraid of the world. There were other children now, too. Daniel 8, William 6, Eleanor 4. A house full of noise and love and chaos. "Do you ever regret it?" Ethan asked. "Coming to Wyoming, marrying a stranger?" Sarah looked at the life they'd built. The ranch that prospered under Ethan's ownership. The school where she still taught part-time. The children playing in the yard. The husband who still looked at her like she was the most beautiful woman in the world, scars and all. "Not for a single moment," she said. "Coming here was the bravest thing I ever did. Marrying you was the smartest. I think I got the better end of that bargain." "We both did," Sarah leaned into him. "We took an impossible situation and built something beautiful. That's not luck. That's choice. We chose each other every day." "And I'd choose you again." Ethan kissed the top of her head. "Every single day for the rest of my life." Inside the house, Grace called for them. Dinner was ready. The family was gathering. Sarah took Ethan's hand, and they walked toward the light spilling from their windows, toward the sound of their children's laughter, toward the life they'd built from a promise made in a storm. Daniel had been right. Two broken people had healed each other, had built something real from practical partnership, had transformed obligation into love and duty into devotion. And if Daniel was watching from somewhere, Sarah thought he'd be proud. Proud of the life his sacrifice had made possible. Proud of the family his final request had created. Proud that his promise, kept in letter and in spirit, had rippled out to touch so many lives. The promise had been fulfilled. The life had been built. And the love that started as duty had become something neither Sarah nor Ethan could imagine living without. They'd survived their fires. They'd fought their battles. They'd earned their peace. And every day forward was a gift they'd chosen together.